What's up? Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
My name is Kason.
This is our fourth episode of our Silent Hill 2 analysis. I'm taking spoilers off the table now. So if you have not finished the game at this point, please go do that, because I can't talk about anything that I want to talk about, like has been true of the last basically 3 episodes we've done, because I can't reference the ending of the game, the big spoiler at the end of the game. So we're taking that off the table. That's going to be part of the analysis moving on. So please go finish the game if you haven't done so yet. Kason just finished it.
I just finished it. Yep.
But you have not yet done the Maria's subplot thing yet.
No, I haven't done that.
I think it's called Birth from a Wish. Birth from a Wish, I think, is what that is called.
Okay.
So that we will be talking about in the final episode. So as of this recording, we're going to do two episodes here. Mm-hmm. So episode 4 and 5, which will get us through the end of the game. We're assuming that next time we will talk about that, the subplot for Maria. We'll probably talk more about Jacob's Ladder, which I still have not had the chance to see yet. Right. Kason did. He'll talk about it a little bit today.
I did. I'll bring it up.
And then we'll open up some questions for the audience, particularly on Patreon. If you're subscribed there at the $5 or $10 level, we'll prioritize those questions because that's what that tier is all about. So I'll put something up there if you want to ask us anything, or even just add perspective on anything to what's been said here for Silent Hill 2. You'll be able to do that there. So look for that. Also, we're voting on the next game.
Yes, that's happening.
It has already started. The 2 games that are in the lead right now are BioShock and Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. BioShock has a pretty sizable lead at this point, but it's not impossible for Blood Omen to catch up. There were a couple of others that I won't mention because there's not really much point. But anyways, that's there. So please check out our Patreon if you'd like to contribute there and be included in those votes. So let's see. We left off at the elevator where Maria was killed by Pyramid Head.
Yes.
So I think I marked that right there. And we had read the quote, he who was not bold enough to be stared at from across the abyss is not bold enough to stare into himself, or into it himself.
Absolutely.
You kind of had a lot to say about that there.
Yeah.
So let's see. What's your next note?
My next note is, if you want to see Mary again, you should just die. But you might be heading to a different place than her, James. Mm-hmm. It's just on the wall. Who wrote this? I have no idea. Someone's going around writing messages to us on the walls. There was one we missed earlier. It was, there was a hole here. It's gone now.
Yep.
I don't know what to make of a lot of them, really. This one seemed very interesting. This is basically an insinuation that James is going to hell, and that if he were to die, he would not see her again.
Yep.
But that if you want to see her again, you should die, meaning she's dead, right?
Right.
But ultimately, there's really no hope. It's like the only chance you have is to die, but if you die, you're not going to be where she is.
Right.
Because you're a bad person.
Right.
So, anyways, that was very interesting.
I basically got up to Eddie. Do you have anything that happens before reaching Eddie?
Oh, yeah, I've got a few things. Okay. There's a letter that calls us a fool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put the word and I have no note after that. So I actually can't remember what else I was going to write.
What you were going to write there?
And then there's this thing, the door that wakes in darkness, opening into nightmares. Anyways, there's just like some poetry, some really just dark poetry, I guess, going on.
Yeah.
That's it's deep. It kind of feels like someone's groping around in my skull. When I read it, I'm like, ooh, that's kind of dissonant, right? It kind of feels a little awkward. But yeah, it's very good. And then there's this weird thing that you have to do once you're around. There's this pedestal that looks like the Virgin Mary. Praying atop of the pedestal. You know, there's a statue on top of it, and you have to like dig up behind it. Like there's some notes that tell you what to do.
Yeah,
you've got to get like, is it a key or a...
Yeah, it's a key.
What it was. Yeah.
I think there was even an allusion to this a little bit earlier in a stairwell somewhere. I think it was written in really bad, like all spelled incorrectly. Yeah. That gave a hint that this is where this was. I assumed that was from Eddie or something like that.
Oh, right.
Who had written it like...
Well, I actually have kind of assumed that a lot of what's written here,
is
Eddie is the one who wrote it. I don't know why I'm even thinking that, but it's probably not Laura. I doubt it's Angela. Maria just could be Maria, but I'm going to say Eddie, based on the people that we know. And so then you have that, but that's so interesting because you've got this weird, just that strange statue. I don't know what the deal is with that statue. It's very interesting, but we start seeing more of that type of religious imagery happening here.
Yep.
And then there's also this this image. There's a picture hanging up on the wall of Pyramid Head and tons of people around him hung in glass boxes, like they're hanging, right? And Pyramid Head is there, just like at the front of all of it. I don't know what to make of that either. But yeah, I finally approached the holes in the ground that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Where as soon as James sees a hole, he's like, I gotta jump in.
Yep.
Right? There's no what else am I gonna do? Not jump in? Of course I'm gonna jump in.
Right.
And it like a dream. It just kind of makes sense that that's what you do when you encounter a hole. And you just like jump down.
Yep. Okay, yeah. So I was kind of forgetting the order of things here. My notes are a little bit of a mess. So I've kind of got two documents here. One with a lot of the dialogue copied over that I want to talk about. And in this one, I was supposed to just give myself bullet points on the order of events, and I think I've already got it wrong. So, yeah, you're right.
Sorry, I just threw out a bunch.
You don't see Eddie until you've gone through, I think, two of those.
Until you've gone through
deep
the holes,
pits.
yeah.
But there was something right before that. So let me...
Oh, really?
Let me see if I can find it here. There's a key. And I don't know how much of this you did. I tend to not do this as much as I know I should, I think. Particularly being someone who's played a lot of Souls, Dark Souls, and Bloodborne and games like that, where when you get new items, basically anything, you should go into the menu and examine that thing because it'll give you an extra description of what it is.
Oh, right. Yeah,
and
that's
there's
true.
actually a ton of clues to what's going on in Silent Hill 2 that you will miss if you don't do this.
Okay.
So my first time playing the game, I mean, like years and years ago, I have no idea how much of that I did. But the first time replaying it now for the podcast, I just didn't do enough of that, I think. So I've kind of gone back through it again and tried to be more careful about that. And there's just, it's crazy. It's like opens up so many more possibilities and theories you can kind of think of like, okay, what's really going on here? But I thought you would get a kick out of this one. Yeah. You examine a key, I think, that unlocks the gate that leading into this area. And the tag of that description reads, "'Tis doubt which leadeth thee to purgatory." Mm-hmm. So this section of sort of like diving down deeper, right? Yeah. Let's see, how do I want to structure this thought? Because I'm trying to think about what we've seen so far and what I haven't mentioned because I was afraid of spoilers. So, okay, let's put it this way. So you basically had figured out already, and I think it's pretty obvious too that Maria is a projection. I think that was the word you used, and that's, I think, a really good word. A projection of the idealized version of James' wife, Mary, right? This is who he believes he wishes that she was.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And what's interesting is the Pyramid Head sort of like appearances in the game, right? You talked about those bars that were kind of bent.
Yes, and Pyramid was standing behind those.
Pyramid Head is just standing there looking. He's not doing anything. It's almost like you're just staring at each other, almost like a reflection in a mirror or something like that.
Ah, interesting. Very good. Okay.
Right? So he's just staring back at you. That's the first appearance. Then the next time you see him, he's with the mannequin dummy things that he's sort of doing what is his thing too, right? And we'll talk about the possible voyeurism that James has from inside the closet there, maybe a little bit later. But it gets really interesting as soon as Maria starts appearing. Because, again, am I remembering the correct order of things here? Because we talked about how he showed up and just knocked us through that gate, right?
Yeah. He just shows up and then we kind of fall down. Yeah.
And then it's almost like Pyramid Head. The spots in the game where James is sort of buying into Maria or becoming closer to Maria, Pyramid Head tends to show up and try to stop that.
Well, that's interesting.
I don't know if you felt that way.
Well, I didn't know. Like the way that you just now put it, like the closer we get to Maria, the more interactions we have with her, the more that, the more difficult that shadow kind of becomes.
Yeah.
And the more resistant that Pyramid Head becomes, and the more he kind of, up until the point where he's just killing Maria.
Right.
He's just like, boom. And it's like, well, we've played the whole game at this point multiple times, right? So, I see that. I feel like that's probably correct.
Well, this was also something that was mentioned in the comments of the last video, and I tried it. I tried it on purpose on the second time I ran through it, trying to get a different ending. When you see Pyramid Head in the stairwell, and I was talking about like he like walks down, he's not like really attacking you even.
Yeah.
He's just kind of he's leading you somewhere. He's not.
Oh, because then the water drains and then we follow.
He's trying to like show you where to go.
This is so okay.
You don't even have to fight him there. You don't have to shoot him at all.
That's true. So you show up, he's there. James is freaked out and wants to leave. But as soon as Pyramid Head goes where he goes, we end up following him.
Yes.
That's a strange thing to happen.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's almost like a dream.
Yes.
It's like, why am I following the thing
monster,
that I am deathly afraid of? But in some ways, it's kind of the only thing to do.
Yeah.
And so you do it.
Yeah.
And that's how dreams are. It's like, well, here's the thing to do, so I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Like, if I'm not mistaken, you had just had an interaction with Maria. Was it that she came back and she yelled at us, right? She yelled at him because like, oh, you left me behind, and he thought she was Mary again, and she got all upset about that. You didn't even care about me.
This is before she dies, I think,
right,
this one. Yes.
Right. It was that interaction or around that point that we exited that building and Pyramid. Oh, that's where we first got separated. That's where. So it was before she she yelled at us.
Yeah, we left her in the hospital.
And we left her in the hospital to rest.
Yep.
And the Pyramid Head knocks us through that gate.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's a warning. Like, stop pursuing this idealized version because he's leading us to somewhere.
That's really
he's leading
good.
us to a truth, right?
That's really
And the
good.
more that we focus on Maria, he starts trying to interrupt that. Now, as soon as we get back to Maria after having been knocked through the fence, Pyramid Head, when he shows up, he kills Maria.
He's like, I will take this from you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it's like he's more forceful about it. It's like, no, you cannot be focused on Maria. You got to find Mary. Right?
Yes.
Is almost like what he's trying to lead you to. So
yeah, that's really good.
I just wanted to mention that was one thing that I was kind of holding back from saying last time that I wanted to make sure I get in here. But it's at this point now that he's taken Maria out, and James is kind of stuck in this purgatory. Now, why is that the case? I put this quote down here. Mary, are you really waiting somewhere for me, or is this your way of taking any trails off? So he's beginning to ask himself, wait, are you really here? And the more he sort of like dances around that or avoids finishing the sentence, is this your way of taking revenge, or is this way you take whatever it might be that he was thinking? He dances around that. And so it's like, you're not ready yet. Like, you're not ready to face the truth. So, as the description of the key here says, 'tis doubt which leadeth thee to purgatory. So he is doubting what he's almost about to accept with that statement. He's about to say, wait a minute, are you really here, or is my reason for being here not correct?
Right.
Is there some other reason? And as he starts to go there and then he doubts it, he has to go through this purgatory section, which is diving deeper and deeper through all these holes.
Yeah.
And I mean, he goes down several of them, right?
A bunch. You would assume you're really, really far down at this point.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But then that's when we meet with Eddie, I think, because there's two encounters with Eddie. I think we missed one here where he's on the ground and he's like, oh, killing people's not like that hard, right?
Yeah, killing people ain't no big deal. Just put a gun to their head, pow.
Yeah.
Eddie is messed up, yeah.
Yes. And so in that scene, I think, is where James is realizing like something's, I mean, he's been denying he's done anything like from the beginning. So it's been, I feel pretty obvious that he has killed, and but like it's getting more obvious at this point. And James is starting to realize something's really wrong with this guy. But at the end of that scene, Eddie gets up. Oh, I'm just kidding. Like, he was dead when I got here. It's it's no problem.
There's a dead person on the table right there.
Yes,
and it's just like, Eddie, did you do this?
Right.
And he's like, as soon as we push him on it, then Eddie starts being like, oh, it wasn't me. I didn't do it. I was just joking. He was already dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wherever Eddie goes, death seems to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. So he said something about how he kills this guy because he made fun of me with his eyes.
Ah, that's right. That's right. Yes.
And how he killed a dog as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Both, he says, had it coming. And then he tries to play it off as a joke. He was already dead when he got here. I was already dead. Honest, he was already dead, right? So that's when you go down 3 more holes after that.
Yeah.
Another really long like lift down into a prison cell where you find Maria alive. Now, this was something I wanted to get your opinion on because I think last episode you had said you were struggling to sort of understand which is what's real and what's not.
Yes.
And I was like, well, you're about to see Maria be randomly resurrected.
And not even hurt.
And not acknowledge that it happened, right?
Yeah. So a lot of this seems to not be real. I have some notes before we get here.
Okay.
So first off, the room, I can't tell who that was that died. You couldn't tell.
No,
right?
no.
It was just some person was dead.
Somebody who had made fun of Eddie, I guess.
And it looked like I couldn't tell what that room was either. The tables and stuff. Was it a classroom? Was it like?
We should probably touch on this real quick too. It seems to me, well, and we kind of alluded to this last time too, but people are seeing different things. So Eddie is seeing different things than James is seeing. However, there seems to be some overlap when James meets up with them, where he can kind of see some of the things that they see, but maybe they're slightly different. But it's like the other worlds, right? Because we read that letter that was in the hospital from that doctor talking about other worlds and stuff, right?
Right, sure.
This delusion that this patient was in, and he's happy there. Is it really right for me? That whole thing.
Do we have to take him out of that?
So what seems to be happening is that each real person who is in Silent Hill at this time is entering some kind of other world that is just their own perception. It's their own reflection of their own inner demons and things like that. So when James mentions Pyramid Head to Eddie, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So it seems that Eddie is encountering people who are just mocking and making fun of him all the time.
Right, and in which case, and that's, once again, that would be a classic projection case, right? There's a lot of people, you might meet a lot of people who think that everyone around them is judging them. Yeah. I've heard this a lot, where people say, oh, I don't go here, I don't do this thing, I don't talk to these people, because they're always judging me. And it's like, you're judging yourself, and you're projecting that judgmental nature onto these other people.
Yes.
Like, that's actually your shadow that you're confronting here.
Yes.
And you're just assuming that, first off, that everyone cares about you.
Yeah.
Second off, that they're talking about you and judging you all the time. And it's like, the likelihood is that they have their own problems, and that you're actually the one judging yourself, and you're seeing things that aren't there.
Yes.
And so when Eddie shows up and he's like, oh man, you can see it in their eyes. It's like, he's actually confronting his own shadow in a sense, where he is projecting like his own shadow onto them, which is like his sense of worthlessness and his feeling of just not being enough and of being, he's got all sorts of like his unhealthy eating and all of this stuff. He's just assuming that that's what people are seeing because that's what he sees when he looks in the mirror.
Right.
And so he sees it in there. He said, you can see it in their eyes. And I think he even accuses us at some point. He's like, not you too.
Yeah,
not you too. Okay,
the
good.
next one when we actually fight him, yeah.
And we just offer the slightest amount of pushback, and he just, boom, we become his shadow. And he's just like you, and it's a projection. That's how projection works.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a really good one, yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually quite possible that who he killed was not a person at all. It's one of the monsters of Silent Hill, but it is him projecting his bullies from the real world, and that's what the monsters are for him.
Yes, that's right. And so, and he feels justified in killing them. Right. Just like we're killing our monsters.
Right.
He's killing his monsters.
So, that's an interesting question. Well, if he didn't kill anybody, but that's not the important part. The important part is he's willing to go that far.
Right.
He's willing to go far enough to kill other human beings over being bullied or mocked or made fun of with the eyes. Like, that's enough.
Yeah, they don't even
justify
say anything.
It. Yeah.
It's just the eyes. Yeah.
Right. So, this is how far gone he is at this point. Now, one thing I found, because I was looking for it, because I had researched stuff, when you first find Eddie in the bathroom, there's a room kind of just adjacent to that where there are some posters and things like that.
I did see that.
Did you see the football players?
Yeah, I remember a sports something or other.
Yeah, so, and he'll mention this later too, somebody that he shot and said, let's see you play football on what's left of your knee.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
So there are allusions here. I think there's another poster in there that says something like physical beauty on it or something like that. So clearly what Eddie is dealing with here is his who knows how long of body shaming, bullying that he experienced. And basically the moment that he then decided to take revenge for those things, he killed a dog. At least we know that much.
Right.
But then also shot some football player that was maybe a bully of his in the knee. And we'll get more to that in a minute. But I just wanted to point out that there's more evidence, like as we're going around here, that Eddie's not seeing the same thing that James is seeing. Laura's not seeing the same things. Angela's not seeing the same things. They're all seeing different things.
Right.
And everything that they're seeing is reflections of their own demons, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
there's a bit of denial going on with Eddie too, because when he's talking with Laura and she asks him, "Oh, did you kill anybody?" and he's like, "Nah, nothing like that."
Yes.
And then it's like, exactly something like that.
Yes.
Like something very similar to that.
Yes.
But yeah, so he's got this denial thing going on, and of course he denies it with us too, and he runs away.
Well,
but it's so obvious what happened.
What's so interesting in that scene too is he denies it at first. No, nothing like that. But then she says, "Well, if you did something bad, why don't you just say you're sorry?" And that time he doesn't bother trying to deny it. He's just like, "Well, no one would forgive me."
Yeah, that's true.
So his attempt to deny having killed someone doesn't last long, even in that conversation.
That's true.
So,
that's true.
Anyway, so did you have any other notes there before the Eddie?
So first off, the hallway place is totally crazy.
Yeah.
We come to a gallows, like this crazy gallows.
Yeah, the prison cell.
And in front of it, there's an icon of two pyramid head people and a person hanging in between them, which I thought was very interesting.
And they've got spears, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yes.
And then in the middle of it is a person that's hanging, right?
Yes.
And so, but with the pyramid heads, it makes them look kind of a little bit KKK-ish, right? Like a little culty, a little
like
executioners.
Did you see that one?
Yes, I did see that one. I didn't know what to make of it, though. I didn't know.
It's almost like this one was a prelude or some kind of like early version of what the pyramid executioners would eventually become when they, like this was the first version of Pyramid Head before they had like the actual helmets. But anyway.
Very interesting stuff. Then we've got tons of Aztec imagery here as well. There's the 3 tablets of atonement, right? So, and each of them has like a different Aztec-looking like figure on it.
Yeah.
So the word atonement means to cover, right? So these are the tablets of covering. Well, it comes from the kippur, from a Hebrew word that means to cover. the ancient Jews would cover themselves with using animal sacrifice. It was like a way of protecting yourself, anyways. That's the idea, right? This is also similar to the garments of skin from the story of Adam and Eve, right? The covering is of animals, right? So you cover them, and that was animal sacrifice. That was there, and then on the Day of Atonement, the sacrifice happens, and that's how the ancient Jewish religion worked. I'm being very brief, by the way. They were covered by the skin of animals, and it's what kept them from the wrath of God, right? So these tablets of atonement are offerings to God. They're offerings of the shadow self, as far as I can tell. You've got gluttony. There's the tablet of gluttony, the seductive and oppressive aspects of oneself to the unseen future prospect of self-betterment and individuation, right? So you give up the gluttonous self, the seductive, the oppressive, and those kinds of things, right? And that you do it so that you can better yourself, right? So the sacrifices are not of themselves atonement, but rather they make an atonement or a covering for oneself, right? That's the idea. So another way of saying atonement is to separate the words, like at one meant, right? So to make one with, to become one with. Yes. Did you know that word was actually made up? It's a completely made up word into the English language when they were translating the Bible.
Oh, so they had to find a way to translate a word.
Yeah, they were like,
let's just cobble this one together.
Exactly. So atonement, the fact that it's at one meant is like, well, that's not just the way it came etymologically. That's how they decided to convey it. Okay. And that is literally what it means. So atonement means to make one with or to become whole, to be the individuated self, right? So sacrifice is the path towards atonement. One must still bring those parts together for a unification, right? You don't just eliminate them. You recognize them, bring them to the front, tame them, and then use them to cover yourself from the difficult realities of life. Anyways, that's what I've gotten here. So there's the gluttonous pig is one of them, the oppressor, and the seductress.
Yes.
And they look like Aztec gods, from what I can tell.
Well...
Or Mayan, maybe, but that kind of thing.
Also think about, maybe we're going here with this. Who of our characters represent
Eddie is the gluttonous
these?
pig.
Right.
The seductress is clearly Maria.
Well, you would think it's Maria. But maybe consider this. What if it was someone who didn't know or didn't intend to be a seductress?
Give me a sec. Like James?
No. Someone who had no intention but was a seductress.
Well, you'll have to tell me.
Angela to her father.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh. Okay.
Someone who doesn't know or is not intending to fulfill that role.
That is interesting.
All of a sudden, that term feels really dark when you think about it like that.
Okay. So, I thought I had this figured out, but that's very interesting, actually. And especially with where this game kind of goes, I wouldn't put it past them. So, that's possible.
I'm not saying that is like necessary, because there's so many ways you can interpret or read the game. But that was something I came across when I was kind of like preparing notes for this. I was like, oh man, like because and we've taken spoilers off the table. So
yeah,
I don't know if we should save this for the end of the game or not, just to like be concise and not like run away with like tangents constantly.
Right. Yeah.
But who do you think are the real characters, like the real life humans, and who do you think are not?
Having
real?
Beaten the game?
Yes.
Having beaten the game, I am now of the opinion that none of them are real.
No, okay, that's very interesting, because I really see
that's my current opinion.
A very valid way of reading it that way.
Yeah.
And so maybe we'll save a fuller discussion on that for later.
Okay.
For the end. But another really valid way I see of reading this is that it's James, Angela, Eddie, and Laura are the real people.
And Maria is not.
Maria is not. The Mary we see in Silent Hill is not. All the monsters clearly are not.
Right.
And then what other characters do we even see in the game? I'm trying to think. I guess that'd be it. But like, the real people who are here are Angela, Eddie, James, and Laura. So, anyways, my reading as to Angela being the seductress is because I'm considering her the real person and Maria not the real person.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Because Maria would more squarely fit into that, like, at first glance.
Yes, clearly, yeah.
But she's not real, and she's not going through a trial in Silent Hill the way that the other characters are. Especially because of the point where you come across those tombstones. Remember the 3 tombstones that are there?
Wait.
You have one that has Angela's name on it,
where
one that has
the graves are dug out.
Yeah, Eddie's name on it, and one with James's name on it.
Right.
So why wouldn't Maria's tombstone be there?
Because she would be arguably more important.
But now,
here's the thing.
That's just one piece of evidence for that reading of it. But there are other evidences for the reading.
There is another tomb that is covered, though.
Yeah, that's probably, I would think.
And to our knowledge, Maria is dead at this point, right?
Oh, but then she comes back.
Yeah, but we don't know that.
Right,
so it would be weird if they put her name on a grave and then the grave was dug up. Then you'd be like, oh, wait.
Sure.
She's not.
Sure.
I don't know. Okay.
Anyway, we're getting way ahead of ourselves here.
Okay.
So we were in the painting or whatever, the Aztec thing.
So I'm done with that.
Okay.
And then we head up to like a morgue of sorts.
Yes.
There's like a morgue. It's the craziest place. I don't know what's up with that, but there's no map anymore. We don't really have access to a map.
Yeah.
So that means we're basically in a more or less uncharted territory. And then I have another one. There's a puzzle with one head but many faces. And that just made me laugh.
Yes.
I'm just like, a lot of these things come together. We can talk about who may be real and who may not be, and why I actually think none of them are later.
Yes.
But we've got one head with many faces, and I think that's just possibly an accurate description of what exactly is happening right now. Right. James is confronting the many faces of himself.
Right. Yeah. Because each of those characters could represent, just like every other character, every monster, everything represents some projection of his psyche, right? So,
which is often true in a lot of stories. But in this one, I'm just like, I don't know. I really have a hard time accepting that any of these characters are real at this point. But a lot of stories, it's like, you'll still have projection. You'll still have characters that represent things like the anima, the 7 archetypes, and all of that stuff. But with this one, it all seems to be aspects of James, one way or another.
Right.
Okay, and now we come to Maria.
Okay, so you find Maria alive in a prison cell, and she's not only alive, she doesn't even seem to be scratched. She doesn't seem to be she doesn't seem to even remember what we're talking about. It's almost like it never happened.
She has no memory of it at all. Yep.
She says, "Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful." Now, here's the really interesting part.
She's known him forever, apparently.
There's the other interesting part about the scene with Maria, too. So Maria was, when we first came across Maria at the pier near the lake, James misidentifies her as Mary. Yeah. And she doesn't like that. It's like each time it happens, she gets like increasingly more frustrated about it, right? So like, what was it that she said? Did you mistake me for your girlfriend or something like that? That was the first time. But then when you find her again after Pyramid Head had hit you through the gate and you found her and she's like, "Oh, I was so scared." And she's like screaming at you. Yeah. She gets really mad at you there for misidentifying her as Mary. Right. Because she wants you to forget Mary and be with her. That's kind of like her MO at this point, right? Yes, yeah. But in this scene, it's really interesting how in the beginning of it, the way that she's talking and the way that she's acting is really different from how she's been otherwise. Most of the time, she's more of the seductress. She's being extremely flirtatious. She's being the sexually idealized version of James's wife, Mary. Right. But here she's being much more like sweet and cute and talking to him in ways that, she uses the term honey.
Right. And she's acting like they've known each other for a very long time.
And acting like she doesn't know anything about the fact that she was just impaled by Pyramid Head.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, we're going to get probably more in depth with this next time when we cover the Born from a Wish sub-scenario with her.
Okay.
But it's almost like along the way, she's not just being made up of James's desires, but also has some memories from Mary herself.
Right,
and those
right.
tend to get stronger as the game goes on.
Sure.
Which is why it was interesting to me. She had this attachment to Laura that she can't understand. Because Mary was Laura's friend in the hospital.
Yeah.
And Maria feels like, I just feel responsible for this girl and I don't know why. Like, what other reason would there be other than she's sort of inheriting or awakening certain memories from Mary along the way?
Right.
So a lot of this dialogue seems to be like she's talking as if she's Mary, and then she kind of snaps out of it in the middle of it. Now, this scene is a really important one, too, because it's the one that's depicted here in the scenes kind of on our sides here.
Yeah.
Where she's on the other side of the bars and he comes and sits down. And that's actually like the first thing you see in the demo, like that plays on like the start screen if you don't do anything on the start screen, right? This is like the first scene I think that they conceived for the whole game. So this was like a really important scene for the writers. So are you confusing me with someone else? You're always so forgetful. Like, how would she know that? She just met us. See, this is a Mary memory coming through, right? Remember that time in the hotel? Like, how would she know it? And then he asks Maria, like...
He's like, are you?
You're not Mary, you're Maria.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? She says, you said you took everything, but you forgot the videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there. And then he says, how do you know about that? Aren't you Maria? And then she starts to kind of snap out of it. I'm not your Mary.
Yeah, I'm not your Mary. And then he says, aren't you Maria? And she says, I am Maria.
If you want me to be. Yes.
I do have some...
Right. And then she says, see, I'm real. Don't you want to touch me? And then she starts being seductive like she had been the whole time again.
Right.
So it's like this kind of duality in her where like half, the Maria half, or the Mary half, was sort of like stronger or coming out at the beginning of the scene. But then, and this is kind of the, what I was alluding to even back in Xenosaga, where they talked about the Thanatos... Eros Thanatos thing. And how they tried to represent that in the Maria sort of like split in this character. I don't think we're going to have time to really go into Eros Thanatos today. Maybe that's something we can save for the final episode.
Hey, good.
But this is at least one instance in which the creators directly alluded to like working that concept into the story.
Well, there's some good stuff you just mentioned about the difference, right? And how she's acting kind of like Mary, but then she's acting kind of like Maria.
Yeah.
This is interesting. As soon as he asks, "Who are you?" and she says, "I'm not your Mary."
Yes.
Right? I'm trying to think of exactly how to word this because this isn't in my notes. This is from what you just said. But she says, "I am Maria if you want me to be." And then she begins acting like Maria.
Yes.
Now, given that she is probably a projection from his mind, it seems as though, and this goes back to their first meeting when she said, maybe you hated Mary, right? It's like, I am Maria if you want me to be. And I think the idea there is that, yes, James wants her to be Maria. And so she begins to be Maria. James doesn't actually, and this is part of his inner conflict, he doesn't actually want Mary.
Yes.
He kind of just wants Maria, right? And that there's this point where it's like, oh, wait, you're being kind of a little too much like Mary. Can you kind of go back to that other thing that you were doing? Right. And she does it. And then we're like, okay, I'll go help you out now. I'll go save you. And it's like the world, it's like we experience some cognitive dissonance and then, okay, everything's back to how we want it to be in our fun little world.
Yes.
And now we can move forward, right? But we couldn't really do anything up to that point. That's kind of the way I see it right now.
I think that's a really good reading. And it leads to the central inner conflict that I was kind of alluding to with the whole Pyramid Head trying to keep him on track thing, right? He does want to see Mary because there's a part of him that wants to accept the truth of what's happened.
Right.
And is wanting to confront it and accept it. But there's the other part of him that doesn't want to, that wants to run away from it.
It's
that
a very
wants to,
strong part.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so he's fighting with himself. And I think that's a really great way of reading the scene, is that every time he seems to start getting to the truth, he sort of sidesteps it for a second.
Yeah.
And
he wants to remain in his mind a little while longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like he's getting there, but as he's on the cusp of getting there, he's not quite ready to go there yet, and he steps back. And there's so many places where this happens. There's at least a couple of quotes where he starts to kind of say something, but then and I think I wrote them down, so we'll get to the other. But the one that I read already was, "Are you really waiting for me here, or is this your way of taking?" And then he kind of trails off.
A detour.
This is almost like a visual. Well, I guess it's both visual and there's dialogue, obviously, as well. But the scene is almost a representation of that concept. It's like, I'm talking to Mary. I don't know if I want to talk to Mary just yet.
Let's get Maria back.
Let's get Maria back.
Substitute you out. And
okay, I don't have to actually accept this yet.
Now I can keep doing it, just like when we played Senua's Sacrifice, right? Yeah. It's like, we're so close to the truth, but then it's like, oh, good. Oh, yeah, Mary's here. Oh, darn it. I guess I got to go unlock 12 more doors now so I can get you.
Yes.
I got to do it, you know?
Yes.
And it's like you're kind of making your own obstacles so that you don't have to actually deal with it. You know, the goal is to deal with it, but you're going to put as many things in front of that as possible so that it kind of prolongs the inevitable.
Right. So anyway, come and get me.
Don't you want to touch me?
Yeah.
Come and get me. I can't do anything through these bars.
And then, stay right there.
I can't do anything through these bars.
Yeah, I think it's just because it's like I can't.
I know, but
can't jump the bones when we're on the other side of the bars, right?
She just seems really tired though. All of a sudden, anyways, it's interesting.
Okay, I'll stay right there. I'll be back soon. So he's going to find a way to get to her. Now, my next note is with Angela. Do you have something in between this and Angela?
I just love the line, "You were always so forgetful."
Yes,
I think that's a great line. James is a forgetful person.
Yes.
Like, think of what happens in the mind when you're forgetting something, right? Or the reason why you forget stuff, or better yet, the reason why you would remember something, or things of that nature. It seems like at least it's possible to forget things if you want to forget things, right?
Right.
Anyways, James, for whatever reason, he doesn't have a very good memory. That's all I'm going to put out there. But it's good that Maria kind of references it.
He's definitely suppressing
for sure
memories.
He's forcing himself to forget things. Yeah.
Yeah. So like he's almost being purposefully forgetful.
Yeah. But this may have been a habit of his even before Mary died, where it's like, you kind of forget stuff, don't you? Like you don't. No.
Yeah.
I'm not making fun of anyone here who's just naturally forgetful. I'm saying that in this story, it might actually suggest something deeper.
Yeah. So anything up to Angela?
Up to Angela? No, I've just got one note here actually. So it's we get a big knife, right? We get the big like sword.
Oh yeah,
kind of thing.
the pyramid head,
and
great knife.
Yeah, it's pyramid heads. It's the one that pyramid head. So this is really good. I don't know. Well, okay, I don't know how to tie this into everything at the moment, but the note that I have here so far says that we are going to use the weapon of pyramid head. We are going to use the weapon of our shadow against itself, right? That's progress. That's a step forward,
sure,
right? One of the ideas is that, how would you put it? Like in the second Harry Potter book, right? How Harry uses the basilisk fang to destroy the diary, Tom Riddle's diary, right?
Yes.
Like taking a part of the enemy, of the shadow, the monster, whatever it is, taking a part of the dragon and using it as a weapon against the enemy anyways, like being able to make that switch, to turn it around. That signifies some progression, right? Some like a step forward, right? He's starting to take things from the shadow. He's starting to take things from that place, the treasures, and he's starting to use them for himself, right? That's an integration of the shadow.
Sure.
Like you talk about the idea of like, you don't just want to banish the shadow. You want to like integrate it, and then when you need to, use it.
Yes.
And that's kind of what James is doing. That's where he's going. So
I like that.
I thought that was pretty good.
I like that.
And then I'm at Angela.
Okay, so this is an intense one.
Yeah, it is.
So you hear her from a hallway screaming, "No, Daddy, please don't."
Yep.
This is where it becomes obvious that she was molested and sexually abused by her father.
Yeah.
So you come inside this room, and the walls are made of flesh. There are holes kind of along the upper part that have pistons sort of thrusting in and out of them.
Yeah,
I think
that was suggestive.
I think that part is suggestive enough to be obvious as to what that's alluding to.
Yes.
But then she's obviously seeing, well, we've talked about how these characters see different things than the other. What we see and what we fight here is called the abstract daddy. It's the name of the enemy. See if I've got it here. I'm going to talk about all the freaking enemies today, but this one, right? So if you look at it, there's two things I see in this, but the obvious one seems to be a bed frame, a female figure lying underneath a male figure who is in a dominating position. So I think the first reading of what this thing would be an allusion to the abuse that Angela suffered from her father.
Right.
And it is clear that at certain points, James overlaps into the other worlds of the other characters. Okay. So I think it could be very well that this is something similar, but maybe like warped in the way that he sees things, but a similar thing to what she's seeing. She's seeing a representation of her father's abuse to her. And so he's also seeing that because of his overlap, but it's like maybe it's represented more closely to the monster types that he sees than what she sees.
Oh,
does that make sense?
Sure. So he can kind of get the idea.
Yes.
Well, in this abstract daddy, he can like abstract the idea and then realize it in his own
other world way.
Yeah.
That's one way, I think, to look at this.
That's pretty good.
Here's another way. Because spoilers are off the table. He murdered his wife by suffocating her with a pillow while she laid in a bed.
Yes.
And this is a male figure huddled over a female figure.
Oh.
I think you could also see this as himself suffocating his wife. I think that's another way you could read that boss. It's almost like the two things could both be in there. Right?
Wow, yeah, I would not have picked that up. That's crazy. Yeah.
So
it's almost as if
he could be seeing
himself.
It's almost like what it feels like is the monster he would see, or the monster that would be represented from his psyche, is a reminder of what he did to his wife.
So it's his own shadow. It's like a third person looking at his own self.
Yes.
Right, but it's his shadow.
Right.
Like it's something he's buried in his mind.
But that's also that symbol is then being mixed with Angela's symbol as well. And they both can be represented with the same symbol and both be read from the same symbol.
Right, that's true. So that's the abstraction.
So it's like both things are kind of the cross or the overlap of their other worlds sort of embodied in one symbol. So that I thought was really interesting. But the other thing, I don't know if you even looked at how many of those holes are on the walls.
I didn't count, but it's quite a few.
It's a weird number.
Oh, what is it?
It's not like an even number or something that would make sense to from a symmetry perspective for building
it's
the
definitely not
model.
Symmetrical. Yeah,
it's exactly 23.
23.
And I'm trying to think, why 23? And I saw it, I'm not taking credit for this because I saw someone else say this online. I thought it was brilliant. It could be the number of times Angela was abused by her father.
So that makes sense. That would make sense. So she's in this room. It's almost like this is the room.
Yeah.
That this is her prison, right? She's in her own. This is her prison. And her prison is like and it is a forceful, and she relives these memories, and she's trapped in this room, right? And 23, sure. That could
so yeah, I mean, it's just such a weird number.
Yeah.
Especially for a room that is more or less rectangularly symmetrical.
Yeah.
Like, why this odd number of piston things? Yeah. And like that to me could be a really accurate reading of that. So, anyways, you fight this thing and finish it off. You talk to Angela here. Let me skip ahead to my notes here. So James tries to comfort her. She doesn't trust him at all at this point. And she says, like, you make me sick. You said your wife Mary was dead, right? And he says, yes, she was ill. And she says, liar, I know about you. You didn't want her around anymore. You probably found someone else. And he says, that's ridiculous. I never. But it's basically exactly right. Because, of course, we know that that's one of his motivations behind killing her. Yeah. But now he's found Maria. And that's the whole conflict of the game. Are you going to chase after this delusion of this idealized version, or are you going to accept what you did?
Right.
And so that's kind of what he's fighting, and she's seeing that, right? She's seeing that he's not maybe even being truthful to himself about this yet. So calling him a liar. She says something about, I know exactly what you want. She's more or less... well, obviously she's in kind of a distraught state, being like in kind of like that moment of trauma or whatever. But she's seeing kind of her father in him. Now, he's trying to calm her down. And he says, Angela, relax. Don't order me around, she says. I'm not trying to order you. So what do you want then? Oh, I see. You're trying to be nice to me, right? I know what you're up to. It's always the same. You're only after one thing. That's true as well, because, and we see this in almost all of the monsters in the game, really, is James' sexual repression or his sexual frustrations being kind of embodied in these characters. And this is something I kind of want to go over too. So I didn't get to do this last time, but I want to look at each of these monsters and that we've seen so far and kind of talk about like what they represent, right? So we went over the abstract daddy monster and what that could mean. Yeah. But the first one we come across in the game is this lying figure. Now, this is the one that kind of looks like the straight jacket, right? Like the arms are kind of folded in the skin. Yeah. So obviously confined or confinement there. But what the attacks of this enemy, they just try to like puke on you, basically. Right. So it's disfigured and it's sick. Okay. So Mary's illness, I think, and her being trapped in it could be very well be embodied in this character. As we see from some of Mary's dialogue at the very, very end in the letter that she writes, she felt whatever her illness was, it did something to disfigure her. Like she had some lesions on her face. I noticed that her like the corners of her mouth. It seemed like she looked very sick. Yeah. Yeah. So physically, it had some kind of disfiguring, symptom. So the monstrous form, the confinement. The inability to really the uselessness, I guess, because I mean, we use our hands. They're immensely important to us. Right, like we can't really function well without them. I mean, obviously there are people who have lost limbs that find ways to take care of themselves and function. Are adaptable. And you can use your feet for a lot of things that you didn't realize you could. But my point is that your hands are really, really important. And so not being able to move your hands, I think, is a great way to symbolize like being useless. She uses the word useless. Right? Sure. I'm useless. I'm ugly. I'm disgusting. And sick. And this monster, vomiting, I think, like clearly represents that. So then we have, I think the next enemy we come across is the mannequins. So the two pairs of legs, right? I think this is clearly a sexual symbol. It's just basically the female sex organ twice, with legs.
Yeah.
So clearly, this one represents kind of his. I mean, you think about it. I think it was. There's more evidence for this, which I think we can go over later. But 3 years that he was watching his wife suffer like this, and was probably unable to be intimate with her. Who knows whether whatever this unnamed disease could be contracted in some way, you know.
Oh, wow.
So, like, who knows if that's the case? I mean, that's totally speculation. But I'm guessing he didn't have a lot of intimacy with his wife during these 3 years.
Sure. Yeah.
So
repressed
sexual desire.
For sure.
And then you get these bobbleheaded nurses. Again, he's going to be in and out of the hospital all the time.
Why didn't I make that's so
right?
dumb. I didn't make that connection. Yeah.
So he's going to be in and out of the hospital.
That's the most obvious one.
All the time. And he's going to be seeing these young nurses, you know, taking care of his wife, whether in the hallway or whether they're leaning over to change the sheets or whatever. He hasn't been able to be with his wife. I mean, he started to have real strong sexual desire in these other women. So that's kind of what these nurses represent, right? Let's see. Then I think Flesh Lips was the next one. So this was that monster that Laura led us to in that room, and she locked us in there, and it was kind of like hanging from the ceiling.
I remember that.
Now, a lot of the monsters in this game, they're sort of like confined in these frames. I think that those mostly represent bed frames. That would be easy because she was constantly in bed, right? Confined to a bed.
Ah, yes, that makes sense.
But at the end of the game, she also apologizes a lot for having become really angry and lashed out all the time at him. There's 2 conversations in particular, and then the letter at the very end where she is basically apologizing for what she did to him. Even though he's the one that killed her, she's apologizing, right? So,
gosh, that would almost make his psychosis worse.
Yeah.
Like, he feels bad enough thinking he's the bad guy, and then it turns out she's the one saying sorry. She felt like she was the bad guy the whole time. And then how bad were you to make her feel
like that
bad about herself when she had no control, and then it just makes you feel worse.
Yeah. And so the fact that it's just these giant lips trapped in this bed, right, it could represent, I think this is one of the ones where Sato directly stated somewhere that this is a representation of her lashing out, yelling and screaming at him and saying a lot of nasty things, pushing him away, is sort of represented in the lips there, right? Another one here, Mandarin. This is a really rare enemy. I think you only find it in like one area in the game.
Oh yeah.
But like its hands have lips on them too. So like similar thing there. Female body seems to be, but they hang from these grates. They're like underneath the floor. You're like walking on top of them.
Yes,
and they're just kind of crawling.
I remember
from underneath you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's basically just an abyss underneath them. They're just like hanging on for dear life, right? So I think there's some illusions you can take from that, right? This holding on, not wanting to accept death or the abyss, or just like desperately wanting to cling, being separated from him, right? Like there's a barrier between them.
That's right. Yeah.
That she can't like get. You could think of it like emotionally. You can think of it as far as communication. You can think of it as far as intimacy. You can think of it, but they're separated by this barrier, and she's hanging on for dear life, separated from her husband, and their relationship's deteriorating. So all of these monsters are representations of that. Of course, we have Mary, the final boss, which I won't talk about yet. But and then Pyramid Head is the one that's not the female enemy, and he is more of an embodiment of one, leading himself to the truth. So it's like I said, when he faced off with him at the very beginning, it was almost like a reflection of himself, right? This is his shadow, as you've alluded to many times.
Right, yeah.
But also, Pyramid Head is created to punish James. It's like his desire to punish himself.
Yes. Yeah.
With this masculine, dark, sort of like executioner figure.
Right.
And that's one thing I wanted to talk about too, is the history of Silent Hill a little bit, how they had these executioners in the past, So we saw some of the paintings, right? At the Historical Society, they had this one with these people that were hanging in these. They're hanging in these frames.
Frames, yeah.
And there's just a pyramid head there, right? But let's see. There's a quote that I wanted to read right up here. Boo, 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 boo. So it comes in. There's the Historical Society where you can look at the paintings or examine the paintings. You get little quotes about them, right? But there's also in the prison itself, Toluca Prison Camp. So it was originally set up as a prison camp built during the Civil War, later became Toluca Prison. So here in Silent Hill, they had a prisoner of war camp during the Civil War. And there's another one you come across, another painting. I'll show you that one too. This one's crazy. Of this death by skewering that they did. Just shows all these dudes skewered this, right?
Yeah.
And so they essentially set up a prisoner of war camp, and they would do this death by skewering, an execution at the prison, death by skewering or strangling. To choose his death is the prisoner's last taste of freedom. So these executioners that dressed like Pyramid Head were the ones who carried out these executions in Silent Hill during like the Civil War time when they had prisoners of war there. So it's like when he arrived in the town, that historical figure kind of got combined with his will to punish himself, and that's what Pyramid Head is. So it looks the way it does because of the history of Silent Hill, but its purpose is actually to help James stay in the right lane to accept what he has done and to punish him along the way, James's will to punish himself. So that's kind of what Pyramid Head is. The character's design is kind of all about that. So now I think we've talked about them all. Let me count them up here because I want to see. Again, I feel like I get ahead of myself so much, but you talked about save points earlier.
Yeah.
The red,
red squares.
Little squares. So, did you come across a part later in the game where there was a certain number of them on a wall?
Was it
Do you remember
9?
this? 9. It was exactly 9.
Yeah.
Guess how many enemy types there are in Silent Hill?
Oh, is there 9 exactly?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And there's a 9th one that they're not showing here. There's 9. There's exactly 9.
So
I want to know what you make of that before we get to that
well,
point.
I didn't realize that, but now I'm thinking about it. So there's 9. So these enemies represent 9 different memories. I already kind of mentioned that the red square might have something to do with memory, not only because it's a save point, but also because he looks at it and he feels like something's groping around his head. So he looks at the save point. These memories are these enemies you fight progressively. You encounter more and more of them throughout the game. I would guess that would have some relation to the save points. And then, so for each save point, if it represents one of the enemies, it represents a specific memory. And then by putting those memories all together, you can get the full picture. Right. And that's where he can finally, I don't know.
So
that's my best.
The enemy they didn't have on that page I was looking at is this creeper. That was the one that they didn't list there. So
also the number 9 in general does represent something along the lines of completion. This would be an Eastern, what would you call it? Not theology, but Eastern stuff. You've got the number 9 being the fullness of the single digits before you hit the 10, before you get the complete, right? So 9 would be something like, I don't know, because there's the temple, there's the lotus temple of the Baha'i faith in northern India. But it's not an 8-leaf lotus, it's a 9-leaf lotus. And 9 is like some symbol of perfection, something or other in the Eastern ideology. And then 10 would be the completeness, right? And so you get the 9, and you're like almost there, but then there's the remainder, which makes it 10, which like rounds it out.
Oh, right.
So once you put it all together, then James needs to just add himself, and then you've got the number 10. You've got the complete, all the fingers on the hands.
Right.
So there's number 9, and then the memories and the enemies. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Okay.
What did you think of that? Is that more or less what you got for that?
Well, I didn't know about the whole rounding thing that you talked about. But essentially it was like, there were 9 specific repressed memories.
It's like
a
memory. Okay. Yeah.
And especially since we go back to the mistranslated, come back to our memorable place, not to our special place from the Japanese version.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
He's diving into the specific memories, I feel like, that these each represent, that he has to overcome in order to, like, remember the real truth of what happened. So the parts of his memory that he's repressing, the parts he wants to forget, if we kind of just go, I'm not going to do it again, but you go through the bosses, it's like, or the enemies, Abstract Daddy, he's repressing the memory of having suffocated his wife. Right. That's what I'm reading in that. The nurses having these sexual urges for people other than his wife.
I would say a lot of these represent single moments. So I would say that nurse represents one nurse.
Probably one nurse,
There was one, probably the same nurse for 3 years.
Yeah. That he just
it's like, hi.
wanted, right?
Good to see you, yeah.
Flesh lips, the yelling and screaming that you do. Maybe one particularly bad.
Yeah.
And I think that moment maybe even is captured in that long hallway right before you fight her, and you hear that as
that's
he's
right.
walking through.
You hear that, yeah.
Because he brought her flowers, and she's like, get out of here, like, I don't deserve that, all that. The lying figure, probably some moment where he saw her suffering terribly and saw disgust. Maybe he felt guilty for feeling disgusted as he looked at his wife. Right? Each one of these, you can kind of see as being like a moment, more or less, that he's trying to repress or that would lead him to the truth of what he did, that he's trying to forcefully forget. Okay, with all that said, we got really sidetracked from Angela.
Oh, gosh.
Because that's where we were. So maybe we should stop there.
Okay.
And continue from that point to the end of the game for next time. Anything else that you had notes on?
I think this is a good place to stop.
Okay.
Can't wait for episode 5.
Okay, so we're going to try to get on track here and actually finish with the end of the game for the next episode. So thank you for tuning in. Appreciate you guys. Till next week, peace out.